Apparently, it's incredibly important that you keep your machine covered and protected from the dust in the environment, which I have not done for the last year and a half, and it is starting to catch up with me in terms of how my machine is functioning. So I went online to find hopefully a very cutesy sewing machine cover that matches the aesthetic of my room. This was kind of the vibe I was going for. Unfortunately, these are options on the internet, and that simply will not do. I like what I like, I want what I want, and often that means I just have to make it myself. You and I are gonna figure out how to do this together. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and let's just have a cozy, comfy sewing day together. Hopefully without any trips to the store, just using scraps. Hopefully something simple and beginner friendly, and hopefully something that doesn't require math because I just don't feel like following a pattern today and I kind of want to wing it. Hopefully this video will just be vibes. Most of the scraps we'll be using are actually remnants from a baby quilt that I made my niece about a year ago, so they're all pretty cohesive and they match my sewing room, which is a plus. I decided on a diamond checkered pattern, so I cut all of my pieces down to 2.5-inch squares. And then I moved on to laying out my pattern, and one thing about me when it comes to something like this is I find it really difficult to balance my OCD of not wanting like two pink squares touching each other and making sure that the green is evenly dispersed because it's more of the accent color, but at the same time wanting to preserve that like homemade charm of a piece not seeming so contrived. I don't know. I'm trying to not stress out about this, and I've spent too much time moving things around, and I still see some things that I would probably like to switch around, so I'm gonna give myself maybe another 2 minutes to tweak and move things, and then we're gonna just get started on sewing all these little pieces together. I did zero math for this, by the way. From what I remember, quilts use 1/4-inch seam allowance, and so my squares will end up being 2 inches by 2 inches. And hey, if this is not big enough, I'll just add more squares. The checkered part is going to be the main piece, and then I want to do a border out of this pink and white gauze. I think it's really pretty, and I want it to be scalloped on the edges, which seems like it will probably require math, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And then this is, I think this is called minky fabric. Don't slander me in the comments. I think it's minky. Mink? I don't know. I don't know. This is gonna be the backing. I don't actually think I have batting, or if I do, it's very little scraps, but I think this will be enough thickness and heft because this isn't actually a blanket. So I think we can skip the batting. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, let's get sewing. Okay. I think this is looking so cute. It's looking a little short though. And I do wish I could just add to the checkered bit. That would be ideal for me. And I technically could, but I did kind of foolishly cut these edge squares in half before I even sewed it, which I would suggest waiting till later to do that, because with quilt tops, you do need to like true up the edges, cut off all that extra seam allowance before you actually quilt the piece. So I would just save that and do it all at once. And if these were squares still, I could more easily add to the sides, but it's okay because we are going to do a little border, and I can just make these bottom pieces a little bit wider than the side pieces because I think the width is good. Like, I don't think we actually need to add more to the width at all. I might actually trim it down a little bit so that the borders can be more even. But anyway, I am still going to use this bubble gauze for the border, although I don't think it is ideal. It also seems like I perhaps cut it on the bias by accident. Bubble gauze is just kind of annoying. It's not very stable and it's hard to get it straight and even, but I did want to keep these bows kind of even in front and center. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna start attaching these strips to the border and then we'll do a cutie little scallop because I really want to do that. So I'm gonna start by trimming this actually. Just gonna get rid of the seam allowance and perhaps take it in slightly. So this is where we're at. The top piece is complete. The border is added. It looks a little janky right now, but we're gonna trim it down. Now what's left to do is we're gonna start on the quilting process. So I need to sandwich some batting. I did end up finding enough scraps. It wasn't wide enough, so I ended up, I don't know if you can see this, but there are pieces that have been sort of puzzled together and I did a zigzag stitch to attach it. That way there's no bulky seam allowance. And I think this is gonna work just fine. You know, I wouldn't do that for an actual quilt, but this is low stakes. It doesn't matter. So this Minky fabric actually is not going to be wide enough to put on the back. So I'm gonna look through my scraps and see if I have a wide enough piece of just plain white fabric. And we're gonna start quilting, which is time consuming, but actually super, super enjoyable. Okay, updates. I dug through my white scraps and I did find a piece that'll be plenty big for the backing, so still avoiding going to the store, which is great. There was another thing. Oh, my outfit change. Girl, I got too hot. I wanted to be cute for you guys in this video, but that sweater is awful, and I grabbed the closest thing to me, which is an unfinished mock-up that was never intended to actually be worn, but it's actually so comfortable and soft, and I love the cut of this little cardigan. I just need to take the time to actually finish it. And lastly, I want to take a second to thank today's video sponsor, which is Squarespace. I genuinely love what they do. They take out all of the complicated and overwhelming aspects of building a website so that you can focus on more important things like building your brand and growing your community. They have an entire library of professionally designed, award-winning templates that are so easy to customize. You can change color, font, layout so that you get a look that truly aligns with your brand without needing a background in web design. They have all the tools and features that you would need as well. So they offer email campaigning, invoicing, scheduling. They have a membership section. I really love their Blueprint AI feature. Literally with just a few questions about your goals, it will generate a starting point for you, which takes away that intimidation of starting from scratch and having a blank canvas. So it's a great way to get started. I think if you're a creative like me, your time is usually best spent towards your craft rather than learning entirely new skills like how to code. So if this interests you, head to squarespace.com and check them out with their free trial. And once you are ready to launch, squarespace.com/Becca Burke will get you 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you to Squarespace, and let's start quilting. Okay, so the quilting is almost done. The main part of the quilting is done. We need to move on to the scallops, which you need to basically trace the scallops, quilt them, like 2 lines of quilting, and then trim off all of this excess. You don't want to trim it before quilting it because that would be kind of a nightmare. So I did some research and I found that there are scalloping tools for quilting, basically a curved ruler. I couldn't get one here in time because this is kind of a spur of the moment project, obviously, if it has not been apparent. But I'm thinking that tracing a mug will work just fine. Yeah, it's dirty. Yeah, I had my coffee in that this morning. So I've traced a couple different things, and I'm basically nervous that the deeper valleys will be kind of a nightmare when it comes to binding the quilt. Like, I don't know how I would bind something like that. I'm sure there are tutorials, but my instinct is telling me that the deeper the valley, the harder it would be. So, with a bigger one, the more you overlap, the less deep this valley is. But then I don't get the width that I need in order to make this long enough. Because remember, we had to extend it quite a bit, so I feel like the scallop needs to come down a lot. So I'm gonna play around. Basically, I'm making a template out of paper, and once I have the right dimensions that'll go the length of this little quilt, I'll let you know what I end up doing. But I'm gonna mess around and see how I can make this all fit together. Okay, so the fact that I didn't put banding on the ends of these sleeves is just annoying me so much. I just need to hem these. But I think what I did works well for this. I just, instead of planning on doing it where this lines up with the edge, I brought it down slightly, so that gives me the extra length that I need. And then for the edge, I just traced more of the mug. I folded this in half so I had sort of a center line guide. And I'm lining up this center line guide with this corner as well as with this line of scallops. So I think this works. I'm going to pin it in place so it doesn't move around, and then I'm going to trace it with my erasable marker. I am sewing way too fast. I need to slow down. This is very tricky. So I'm pretty happy with how the scallops came out. There's a lot of bubbling back here, but I'm leaving it. This corner piece was just bothering me. It wasn't in line with these. It just comes out too far. So to fix this, I just flipped it over. It's kind of hard to tell how it's going to look with all of the pattern and the markings and everything. So flipping it over so I'm just looking at the solid white makes it easier for me to see. I just took my corner piece and made it so that it's a little bit more in line with these. And it's not perfect, but the fact that I didn't have to do any math to achieve these scallops, I feel makes up for the fact that there's a little bit of asymmetry. Okay, I'm done trimming it, and this is how she looks. When I trimmed it, I just made sure not to go all the way down into the peak because I think it'll just make it so much easier when we do bind it. And I don't think that the binding will fold over enough to cover these little stitches, but if it bothers me, if it shows too much, I'll just go ahead and remove them once it's safe to do so. For the binding, I really wanted to do sage green. I just think it would make it pop a little bit more, but I couldn't find quite the right shade, and I didn't have enough of this green to make my own. So I do think I'm just going to use my satin white bias binding. And I think the fact that this is cut on the bias will actually be a plus because it'll just have a little bit more give and stretch to go over these curves. Because I'm not totally sure, but I think traditional quilting binding is cut on the grain line, so it doesn't quite have as much give to it. And then when I attach this, I do plan on sandwiching in this sage green ribbon at 4 points. So it'll go over the sewing machine like this, and I'll have a piece of ribbon here and a piece of ribbon here on both sides so that we can tie a cute little bow and secure it in place. I think that'll be really cute. I do need to do some research and figure out how exactly to do these scalloped edges, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and do that on my own because I feel like it's gonna be hard. And I anticipate there being a little bit of trial and error, and I'd rather spare you guys, I think. So the next time you see this, it'll be complete. I really enjoyed this project. I feel like I just needed something simple and fun and pretty and not something that I need to fit. A garment can be a little bit more complicated, and this was just purely vibes and purely fun, and I hope it was for you as well. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to check them out in the link below. And let's see how this cutie sewing machine cover turned out.